to be.
Yeah, and I guess really this all kind of brings us to the point of have you heard Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory?
I've heard of it, yes. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so basically his whole idea is central banks around the world inject liquidity into the financial system. They're essentially making a milkshake, right? They're kind of everyone's throwing their liquidity in to this cup, but only one asset gets to have the straw, right? That asset sucks all the value into it. And his theory is the dollar milkshake. So obviously the dollar is that asset that gets to hold the straw, and we're having all of that liquidity ultimately seek out the dollar. And so what you see around the world is the dollar strengthening, other currencies are selling off or losing value against the dollar. You see other assets, cross markets selling off, and the dollar continues to strengthen. And kind of a classic deflationary environment. What I'm wondering is, does this help to accelerate kind of the strengthening of the dollar, and then ultimately the need for the weakening of it? Will this accelerate people looking to get outside the system, right? Does this drive people to gold, to crypto, to other things where they feel like they're getting out of the system? Or is that more something simultaneous that happens, but isn't necessarily a driver of that action?
Yeah, I think the first part, Brent's got it right, that everybody's racing to the dollar. And they're racing to the dollar for two reasons. Reason one, remember now, let's remember that the dollar is the reserve currency. What that means is 90% of world trade is in dollars. We quote the price of crude oil in dollars. We quote the price of gold in dollars. If you are Chinese and you want to do a trade for Brazilian timber, you're quoting the price and paying for it in dollars is what you're doing most of the time. Maybe in rare exceptions, they'll accept yuan or they'll want real, but most of the time it's always done in dollars. So the world needs dollars for two reasons. One is because there's trade that their economies have slowed, their trade is down, they need to get their economies going, so they need to amass dollars, especially the Chinese. They want to restart their economy. Well, they got to buy crude oil. They got to buy copper. They got to buy aluminum. They got to buy wood. They need dollars for that. So they're trying to acquire dollars for it. The second thing, the reason everybody wants dollars is when you get into a crisis, everybody looks around and goes, what currency do I want to be in? And the answer is, I want to be in the reserve currency. I want to be in dollars. So I've had this argument with people in Europe. I can't believe that the dollar's going up. Why? You think that we want to run the euros when there's a problem? Because ultimately, if I want to buy crude oil, if I want to buy a copper, I still got to go back to dollars for it as well. So that is why I think there's this giant need for dollars, the safe haven currency, and because it's the thing that we do trade with. To your second question, well, will this accelerate the need or the desire for people to find another reserve currency? I think they've been desperately looking for one for 10 years. I think, to quote Winston Churchill, the dollar is the worst reserve currency we've ever devised, except for every other one. And so it benefits that there is no alternative. You're not going to, wave a wand and say the euro or the yen or the pound or the yuan. None of those can fill the bill that the dollar fills. I've argued that in theory, the next reserve currency will be a crypto. For a hot second, I thought maybe Libra would do it, but then I thought for sure I was onto something, because the first thing that they did when they announced Libra was they dragged Marcus in front of Congress and ripped him a new one because they were afraid of what Libra represented. So I'd like to say that the next currency will be a crypto. It probably doesn't exist yet. I don't know when it will exist and which one it will be, because it needs to be both a medium of exchange and a store of value. Well, Bitcoin might be a store of value, but it's not a real good medium of exchange. Maybe there's some others like Ether or something like that you could argue are a better medium of exchange, but they're not a good store of value. So we're on the path for it. I've used the analogy of, if you remember early on in the search engines, we used to have Lycos, and then that went bankrupt. And we had Alta Vista, and that went bankrupt. But we had the idea, one of these guys is going to be a really good search engine one day. Then we got Yahoo, and it became the fastest company to become an S&P 500 company. We thought that was it. Then we got Google, and then everything changed. Well, we're waiting for the Google of cryptos to show up, and we're probably somewhere in the Lycos, Alta Vista era, on our way to the Yahoo era before we get to Google. And then I think that that will be the new reserve currency. And I don't think that the next reserve currency will be some government controlled crypto. I think it will be outside of their reach is what it is, where it would go. There's no reason to have a government controlled crypto takeover. You've got the dollar, and you can, and the Fed could make you a digital dollar in a week if you wanted that, but it's still the dollar. It hasn't changed anything. So I do think it's coming, but it still could be many years down the road. Right now, maybe it exists in some infancy form right now, whichever crypto is going to be it, or maybe it's still to be invented.